What happened that time you saw the fury of a patient man? When I was in high school, an upperclassman at my all male student Catholic school followed a female teacher into the bathroom and tried to assault her. She screamed initially before he pulled a knife on her. The gentlest, most caring, socially awkward Latin teacher heard the scream and rushed from his classroom straight into the women's restroom. He clocked this kid across the face and dragged him out by his collar into the hall. Then he checked on the traumatized female teacher. Later, he just went back to class and continued teaching as though nothing happened. Dude knows 7 languages, has never dated anyone, and is a brilliant, always calm man. People gained a lot of respect for him after that day. He's still really weird though. If there's one time I want to see the fury of a patient man, it's at a time like this. This is a great one to start off with. It's uplifting and it's kind of inspiring almost. I don't know, I like it. Story 2. Gym class in high school. The quiet, nerdy kid kept getting picked on during dodgeball. One jerk kept hitting him with balls even though he was already out. The quiet kid wasn't tiny, he was about average sized, maybe a little taller than average. He eventually lost his temper. He ran across the court and literally delivered a double-handed choke slam to the jerk. Being a bunch of teenage boys, we all lost our minds cheering for him. He got suspended for 3 days, but it was reduced to 1 day in-school suspension after a bunch of us went to the principal and explained the circumstances. Story 3. Back in uni, one guy I knew on greeting and small talk terms, but not much more, was known as the literal rock against the waves. Childish freshmen picked on him for being slow for ages, and he just shrugged it off. You need to imagine him as a gentle giant, 6'9"-ish and arms as thick as my thigh, but very sweet and lovable. Hobbies included caring for shelter kitties and posting reviews for oddly specific music theory books online. I eventually became friends with him and we hung out sometimes, grabbing a coffee and such. And one day we were avidly discussing something when 3 of the children freshmen came by and pestered him. He informed them twice that we were currently talking and they shouldn't disturb us, please and thank you. With foreseeable success, though. So he just shrugged and tried to continue our talk over their pestering. Frustrated that they didn't succeed, one of them resorted to the last straw of a childish bully, and called his mother a harlot. Fun fact, his mother died when he was 14 and he never fully came to terms with it. He took a deep breath, stood up, and grabbed the offender by his head, swinging him like a club at the others and kicking them into next Tuesday when they were all on the ground. Myself and 2 others finally pulled him off and he instantly calmed down. Story 4. My dad, about a decade ago when I was in high school. We lived on a hill, and if you go down the hill, it leads into the main part of town, where all the shops and stuff are. And if you go up over the other side, it's where a lot of the bars and clubs are. It's quicker to go over than around, obviously. Back then, my parents each had a car instead of sharing one, and only one space in the garage. And drunk idiots were constantly damaging Mum's car. Well, one night, Dad happened to have a day off fall on the weekend, and he could hear a group of drunk people walking up the road. His little office/computer room is at the very front of the house. So he gets up, goes out the front door, and just waits near the front lawn, watching. They're being loud and pushing each other around. Mum's worried as hell and comes to get me, because she doesn't want him to get hurt by some drunk idiot. And I go out to see what he's doing. They end up pushing each other around more, and one bumps into the car/is leaning on it. Dad tells them to get away from it. They start taunting him, so he walks closer. One of the little bastards clean smashes the side mirror off while laughing at him. Dad is a 6'8" ex-basketball player. Basically, is just all around frickin' huge, and is small man bait on a normal day. Dad hit him straight in the jaw, and you could see as his jaw completely broke. Guy is immediately screaming and bawling his eyes out at the same time, while his friends pick him up and run away. Never heard from them again or got in any trouble for it. Dad just went back inside and watched TV. Story 5. Working in an auto parts warehouse. One of our managers was a very quiet, collected person. One particular day, some of the orders were wrong and the ordering system was malfunctioning. He calmly goes out back, starts up a forklift, and rams it full speed at a huge stack of wooden pallets. He must have thrown it in reverse and repeated this about a dozen times, raising and lowering the forks appropriately. Everyone stopped to watch as every last pallet was destroyed. When there was only a pile of wood left, he turned off the lift and calmly walked back in and continued working as if nothing happened. Honestly, trying to do work having a system malfunction? I get it. I do. I can sympathize with this guy. Story 6. Twice in 20 years I've seen the fury of my very patient, docile, and kind stepdad. The first time was when some 12th graders chased my brother and cousin all the way from school to our backyard, threatening their lives with pocket knives. Stepdad calmly walked to the backyard, grabbed the big kids by their throats, and lifted them up, pinning them to the fence. "Stay the hell away from my kids," was all he said in a calm, teeth-biting kind of way. The kids booked it faster than I've ever seen anyone run and never bugged my brother or cousin again. Then we all went inside and made burgers. The second time was in my angsty preteen years when I called my mother a female dog. He turned at me and I've never been so scared in my life. This time he was right pissed and screamed at me until I was backed up against our bar counter, shielding myself with the bar stool legs. The second he backed off slightly, I booked it in my bedroom and barricaded myself in with all the furniture I could find. Didn't come out for a solid day until I got up the courage to apologize. But normally, he's a teddy bear. This is a man who is very protective of his family, and I respect that. Being able to be restrained about everything and then really, not lash out, but go all out for one specific facet of your life that you can't stand to be disrespected. Something about that, it's really nice. I don't know, I like it. Big fan of your dad, OP. I bet after that you never disrespected your mother again. Story 7. Not the last time, but a notable one. Kid at my school was the third tallest kid in the school, but definitely the biggest. Probably 6'6", but really overweight. There was a little turd who had bullied loads of kids for years who decided to pick on him outside of history, which was on the top floor of the school. Now this guy was barely 5 foot tall, if that, and no one liked him. Big Kid wasn't the most popular guy in school or anything, but he wasn't a bully, and was well liked enough. So 5 foot is there yelling at 6'6", the usual garbage. You're a coward, you suck dong. Friggin' scum, that kind of stuff. Everyone is pointedly ignoring him. Then he actually hits him. 6'6's head turns slowly towards him. It's like watching a golem come to life in a movie. 5 foot is there in standard young man boxing stance. 6'6 walks over to spiral staircase which goes all the way to the bottom of the school. 4 floors down. 5 foot realizes what's about to happen and just goes quiet. 6'6 throws him down the stairs. We all rush to watch as he tumbles down flight after flight, finally stopping unconscious at the feet of our deputy head, a really nice guy actually, who was just about to come up from the basement level. Deputy head gets the nurse and kid was taken away, presumably to hospital, but I don't know. He wasn't seriously injured, unbelievably, just very badly bruised. Deputy head comes up to where we were all standing, about 20 of us or so, and says, "Did anyone see what happened here?" Student, I didn't see who, pipes up and says, 5 foot tripped and fell down the stairs, sir." Everyone nods in agreement. 6'6 was still in school a few days after, and people were expelled from our school for much less. So I guess 5 foot kept his mouth shut. The insults he was throwing around also would have gotten him expelled or at least suspended. So yeah, maybe don't pick on guys around 4 times your body mass, even if they seem quiet. I gotta admit, a little overkill. That's very dangerous. At the same time, it's the fury of a patient man. Push him too far, you face the consequences. That being said, I am glad that the kid didn't die or anything. Even when people are total jerks, I don't know if just straight up throwing them down a flight of stairs is a good idea. But with no major injuries, I just hope he learned his lesson. Story 8. I once was playing soccer in a local school area. After 8 p.m. the gates are closing, so we just agreed that we're going to leave after 8 p.m. When it was like 7:59, a friend of mine kicked the ball on the roof, not on purpose. Note, this was my brand new ball, so I really wanted it back. So I climbed on the roof of the school, but this was kinda hard, so it took longer than the 1 minute I had before the gates were closing. I finally did get the ball back, but by this time it was already 8:15. That's when I spotted my local police officer. I don't know the English word for it. It's a police officer that only has a specific block. I know this guy because he's the policeman from my block. He started shouting my name that I need to get off the roof now because I was trespassing. So I panicked because a policeman was shouting at me. I climbed down the roof and the policeman told me that I was trespassing and that is against the law. I told him that I just wanted my new ball back and that I planned to get out of the gates by 8 p.m. But this guy was old and grumpy, so he asked for an ID card. Being 11 and in Holland, the minimum age for an ID card is 12. Or 14, I don't know. So I didn't have an ID card. So this dude took me to the local jail. So at this point, me and 3 friends are sitting in a 2x2 jail cell. It had 144 bricks, 42 glass bricks, a metal door, and a bed, no sheets. I'll never forget those numbers. So another agent started asking questions about a series of burglaries, and we just stood there with a, "What the hell, we're 11 years old, mate," faces. So the policeman said, "Well, if you're not going to talk, I guess we need to call your parents." The 4 of us were like, "Oh my god, finally. We asked for this the first time you took us here." Well, okay, we were crying too, we won't lie. So I guess 20 minutes later, I hear some noise in the distance. An older guy yelling to an officer. We were like, who could this be? Another note, I grew up in a strict Christian family. Turned out it was my father yelling at the whole station to release us because we were just playing soccer, and that the policemen were freaking stupid to think a group of 11-year-olds was responsible for a series of burglaries. That was the first and last time I heard my dad curse. Story 9. My dad was career Army as an officer. I have always known him as a soft-spoken, kind, and never gets angry kind of person. He rarely ever raises his voice that I know of. There's a law in the US that basically protects any service member nearing 20 years from being forced out so they can get the full retirement benefits. One day, he gets a call from his commanding general telling him that he is going to be forced out due to budget cuts army-wide. He got up out of his seat and started yelling at the general on the phone that it was impossible due to the law since he was in the safe zone. He started quoting section after section, yelling at the general, telling him he had screwed up and that it better be fixed. A few days later, my dad got a call from the general again, and the first thing the general said was, "Before you say anything, let me apologize for the other day. You were 100% correct." But budget cuts are budget cuts, and as soon as my dad hit 20 years, he was retired. Story 10. I knew a girl who was living with a guy who had a severe anger management issue. He had kept it under control for the few years they had lived together, but one day he snapped over some minor issue and hit her repeatedly, banged her face in the concrete, and tried to choke her until a passerby stopped him. So obviously the relationship was over, and she was going to fetch her stuff from the apartment. She, once again, obviously didn't want to go alone. So me, two other friends, and her brother, who I also knew, tagged along to keep things in check and to help carry stuff. When we arrive, her ex gave us attitude, which causes her normally extremely mild and docile brother to snap completely. He smacked the guy up against the wall with one hand and punched him repeatedly with the other, holding him up against the wall all the time, because you don't hit someone who's down. We just stood there in shock and awe. Given the way the girl looked after the beating she had received, black and blue, bruised, her entire face scraped, choke marks around the neck, and so on, we didn't mind much what was going on, and we just let him punch him out. Then we got her stuff and left as he started to wake up. 2 times during the following months, the ex was jumped twice when moving outdoors in the evening. I don't know who did it, and I don't want to know. I guess everybody has their trigger. If man has anger management issues bad enough to lead to domestic abuse, then I lose all sympathy. You need to actively seek help at that point. Or don't be in a relationship like that. You can't handle it, obviously. Disagreements, arguments, they're gonna happen in relationships. With any kind of anger management stuff, you gotta watch yourself, buddy. I hate to say it, but I think this is deserved. Story 11. My father-in-law is such a patient man. He's quiet, reserved, and has a great sense of humor, when my mother-in-law lets him get any words in at least. My mother-in-law talks a lot. She will ask you questions, and when you start to answer, she talks over you and tries to answer them herself. It's infuriating and obnoxious. One time she asked me a question and I started to answer her, and she cut me off to basically finish my answer for me and then start to ask another question. Lather, rinse, and repeat for about 4 questions. Finally, my patient, quiet, sits back and watches the world father-in-law just explodes on her, basically screaming at her. "Oh my god, let her actually answer the question you asked. Stop interrupting. You never let anyone finish their thought." It was glorious and I almost tackle-hugged him. She still does it to this day, but that day was amazing. Story 12. I worked with this theater director who is well known for being one of the nicest and most intelligent people you will meet. But there was one actor in this show who was a grade A pain in the butt. She would constantly be late for rehearsals, and once she didn't show up at all. The reason was her girlfriend was in a car accident, but the problem was she didn't tell anyone she wasn't coming. We found out through Facebook. This was a show with some deaf cast members and some hearing actors who didn't know ASL, and they had to do some signing, so we brought in an ASL instructor. This woman, though, did know some ASL, and thought she knew better than the college professor and would constantly try to correct her. We were doing spacing rehearsal in one of our touring spaces with very little time. This is 2 months into the rehearsal process and the director has finally had enough of her. He adjusts her blocking slightly just because the space we're in is a bit different, and she starts to say something. The director just screams, "The show isn't about you, goddammit!" And he throws his script to the ground so that pages fly everywhere. It's the first time any of us have ever heard him yell or curse in anger. She runs off stage crying. Then he calmly says, "Can we get back to work, please?" And then later, during a break, I overhear him talking to her about how he is going to tell everyone he knows in theater to never hire or work with her. Yeah, in theater, you don't screw around like that. People will just blacklist you. And assuming it's just community productions, you'll never do theater again. You have lost a hobby because you were insufferable. Sucks to suck. Also, I have no idea what that yell sounded like. I moved away from my mic to not blow it out, and it probably sounded weird and far away, but I hope it was fine. Story 13. My uncle is the most peaceful person I know. He's essentially a living version of what would happen if you combined General Iroh, Bob Ross, and Dr. Dolittle. He keeps a garden, feeds wild birds out of the palm of his hand, has been known to walk up to a deer without it running away. I've never heard him raise his voice except to talk to someone really far away in my entire life. He was in the military during Vietnam. Not sure what branch. He never saw a combat zone. He was the guy who fixed stuff that came back from a combat zone. The war ends and he goes home and returns to his normal life working at a tire factory. One night he's getting off of a hard day at work and wants a drink, so he goes to the local bar. 3 guys are standing outside talking amongst themselves and he goes by to walk in, but they stop him. He tells them he doesn't want any trouble. He's had a stressful day at work and just wants to grab a drink. They go back and forth for a while and eventually he just pushes past them to get in. They did not like that and pulled him back, and he proceeded to knock one unconscious and floor another. The third backed off and let him inside. By the time he left, they were nowhere to be seen. Story 14. My grandfather is a nice, funny, flirty guy. Was an exec at a manufacturing business after being the 3rd employee. Everyone gets along with him and he was fairly well off in my small town. One day my cousin and I are helping with some work and we go to the store. There is a lot of poverty in my hometown and one of the poorer families was at the store. My cousin makes some comment, he was kind of a jerk at this point, about them being poor. And what were they doing at the store because they couldn't afford anything or something like that. My nice grandfather grabs him and slams him against the wall and says, "Nothing in your life makes you better than them. Right now, I'd rather have them buy me than you." He then makes my cousin go apologize and my grandfather announces my cousin will pay for whatever they're getting. He makes my cousin work off the expenses for him to prove a lesson, and now that cousin is a stand-up social worker, and he specializes in poverty, abuse, and rehabilitation. Only time I've ever seen my grandfather be aggressive. Story 15. Alright, so this story is about me. I'm a very laid-back, stoic, water-off-a-duck's-back kind of guy. I was a skinny little geeky kid with a smart mouth, but funny. I got picked on at times, but never really let it bother me. One day I was coming home from school and there was a kid standing in the street outside of my house. As I walked up, he called out to me and asked if I was name. I walked up to him and told him that was me. He then pulled his hand out of his pocket and shoved a friggin' Swiss Army knife into my leg. I lost it. Cue adrenaline surge. Grabbed the wrist holding the knife and twisted it until I heard bones grind and snap. Kicked him in the stomach with the leg he had just stabbed as hard as I could and then he doubled over. I grabbed his head and brought his face down as I brought my knee up. Same one he had just stabbed. Broke his nose with my bloody knee. That took him to the ground and I kicked him in the ribs a few times. Then, I just walked away. My dog, Bear, was straining at the end of his chain trying to get at the guy. Let the chain loose, and Bear went nuts. Guy got up real quick and ran. No idea what happened after that. Bear came back about 45 minutes later, none the worse. Over 20 years later now, and I still have the knife the kid dropped, a scar above my knee, and no clue who he was or why he stabbed me. By far the most surreal experience of my life. I don't know if this is the fury of a patient man. This is the fury of a man who just got stabbed. Like, I don't know another way to say it. You got attacked. You defended. You defended pretty well, I'll say. And also, can I just add that for some reason, this reads like the most, British thing ever? Maybe I'm way off base, but something about it. And I swear it's not just the stabbing. Anyway, these stories were a lot more therapeutic than I was expecting, I think. I hope you enjoyed them as much as me, and I also hope that you have a wonderful day or night wherever you are. I will see you in the next one.